Amplify, thank you so much for joining me. This is Shield and Amplify, how to use your privilege to support authenticity and safety for others. I am Britany Acre. I am a senior account strategist with a web development company called Last Call Media. Additionally, I do serve as the chief of staff for Drupal for Gov. So thank you for attending our flagship event, which is Drupal GovCon. I have a background in service that is a through line of my entire career, and that has included my first job as a shampoo girl, and then also a background in operations, HR, people management, sales, and then now account strategy. In addition, I'm a mom, a wife, a daughter, and a friend, and I would actually argue that those take precedence and are harder than anything that has come higher up in this list. So what we're going to cover today is the privilege of showing up authentically. We are going to talk about what safety means and the role privilege plays, 4 tools to be a better team ally, and then we're going to practice those tools together. That does mean audience participation, so I'm warning you now because some of us find that a little scary. And then we'll have some closing time questions. So the privilege of authenticity. I always feel the need to say this dramatically. Previously, in Authenticity is Contagious. The last 3 years, I did kind of the conference circuit, and I did a talk called Authenticity is Contagious. If you came to that talk, I started it with a story that I was a brand new mom to twin boys. And so this was them. They had just been born, and they were tiny. So if you saw that talk, this is a brand new picture of them. So that's just for people who happened to join you before. But essentially, that talk was about how we were all struggling under the weight of traditional professionalism, and we were tired of it. We were exhausted by it. And really, in my research of what traditional professionalism was, where it came from, the talk really just became a rage against it. It became a critique of it. And the fact that maybe it started out altruistic, maybe it started out as something that worked for the groups that it was created by and for, but it had really become this exclusionary and dehumanizing tool of control. And that what it created was emotional detachment in the workplace, and it created disconnection and burnout. And what happened through COVID, though COVID was awful, we can all admit, but what COVID also did was it kind of forced a humanizing with all of us. Suddenly, we saw each other through a different lens. We saw dogs and babies and pajama bottoms. And it really exposed the illusion that our work selves weren't our real selves. What that also showed us, was that this authenticity, this version of ourselves that we were now able to show up as and in the workplace, it fostered a level of trust and feedback and better collaboration that benefited our work selves, our home selves, and even the businesses that we worked for. What I went on to talk about in that talk was that in addition to authenticity, something that professionalism had stripped from us was the ability to use emotion in our interactions. But the fact was that emotion, when used strategically, really adds clarity to the way that we are able to communicate human to human. We were able to talk about real-world examples of how this benefited ourselves and businesses. And then our final takeaway was that it was possible to build safe spaces. It was not only possible, but it was imperative to the health of our businesses and the people that worked for them. So this begs the question of me, if authenticity was contagious, then maybe safety could be too. And so reoccurring themes and questions that came from the audience at these talks. It was the same talk, but given over the course of several conferences. I kept hearing a desire to better identify and understand what was keeping team members from showing up authentically. We knew it was happening. What we were struggling with was how to identify it in the moment, or proactively or reactively. There was a desire to want to know what we could do as individuals to impact the system to break down these barriers that people were experiencing, especially if they were happening internally. How do I know what my team members are dealing with if it's something that's happening within themselves, even if it started with the system? And then a question I often got was, why can some people show up as themselves and others don't? Some feel safe to, some don't. Why is that? So these themes and questions essentially created the talk that you're going to experience with me here today. What tools and the tools that we're going to talk about and practice together. These problems seems really big, and sometimes we feel quite small and we have so little time together. But that's the idea, that we as individuals, we start small. We take small bites. We don't try to change the entire world. We take one step at a time. And that's going to be our goal here together. Take small steps together, start small, and we'll just dream big. I believe, again, that's going to be reiterated throughout this, that if authenticity is contagious, we're here today to say that safety is as well. So story time. I want to ground us in some stories of real-time examples of how safety impacts those on teams, to get us in the right mindset and think about the kinds of problems that face our teammates every single day. These stories they're going to serve as our why. Things that we can be thinking about as we listen to these stories, and also just every day in our interactions, are who feels safe to speak up in our meetings? Who edits themselves before they hit send? And send can be on that email, in that Slack message, or just before they open their mouth. And then also, who carries more risk just by being present in the room? All right, let's get started. So you can't tell if you haven't met me before, but I have very large curly hair, so this is my favorite story. Or I should say this is one I align most closely with. So hair and hiring. So a Black woman developer is interviewing for a senior role at a well-known civic tech consultancy. She considers wearing her natural hair, but a mentor warns her that it may be seen as unprofessional in that space. She straightens it for the interview and receives the job. 6 months later, a white colleague comes in with blue hair and gets compliments for being bold and creative. What impact could this experience have on the team dynamic, on this individual? Well, the Black developer may never feel like she can show up as herself in this space. She may begin to withhold other parts of her personality in meetings, and that could eventually lead to her not being considered for leadership opportunities because she's holding back the best parts of herself. And then that can further lead to her withholding more and more of herself when she is going to be more and more perceived by the public. So the thing that we want to take away from this is that this message of be yourself is not universal. Some identities are celebrated for their differences, and some are diminished. The wheelchair in the workshop. During a high-profile design sprint, the venue is an older government building with no accessible ramp. A UX researcher who uses a wheelchair has to join remotely from the lobby via Zoom. The lead facilitator, who has positional and cultural privilege, we will define those later, notices and moves the entire session to the ground floor, no questions asked. The impact on the team dynamic. This shift signals to everyone at that meeting that inclusion is not negotiable. The researcher is able to fully participate, is able to share their critical user insights, and then the team is able to deliver a better informed prototype. Our key takeaway from this story is that when someone with privilege uses it to change the conditions, authenticity and participation becomes possible for everyone present. Our last story, pronouns and partnerships. A trans project manager joins a government-facing team. In the first multi-agency meeting, a senior client repeatedly misgenders them. The project manager stays quiet, calculating the professional risk. A cisgender colleague steps in to correct the client and then models correct pronouns throughout the rest of the meeting. The impact this may have on the team dynamic is that the project manager relaxes, not having had to take that professional risk. They're able to engage more fully in the strategic discussion. They feel safe leading future client calls, having seen this behavior modeled by someone more senior than themselves. The client, also seeing this correction modeled with grace and handled smoothly, also begins using correct pronouns in other areas of their life. Our takeaway from here is that for some, being fully themselves comes with no risk at all. For others, it is a calculation every time they open their mouth. This is a quote from a psychiatrist, Carl Jung: "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The moments that we just went through in these stories show us something important. Authenticity and safety are powerful, but they are unequal. So for some, it's automatic, it's given. For others, it's a calculated risk. So what we ask ourselves is, if these things are not built into our environments, how do we make them more of a group effort? What safety actually means and the role that privilege plays. Psychological safety is the shared belief among team members that they can take interpersonal risks, like speaking up, asking questions, giving feedback, or showing vulnerability without fear of punishment, ridicule, or harm to their reputation, credibility, or relationships. And in the context of project teams and this talk, that means being able to say "I don't know" without looking incompetent. They can admit mistakes without being blamed. They can propose bold ideas without being immediately dismissed. And they can be themselves, even if that is different from their perception of the group's norm. And that may include asking for accommodations that they need to be successful. And here's the catch: like we said, safety is not equally accessible to everyone. So for some team members, the risk is higher because the consequences are steeper. And that's where privilege comes in. So for example, a white male team member may interrupt confidently in a meeting, whereas a minority team member may worry that they will be labeled as an interrupter. A neurodivergent person may hesitate to ask for the accommodations they need to be successful if they have not been shown that that behavior, that ask is safe. Privilege doesn't mean that your life is easy. It means that the system has been tilted in your favor, giving you more backup, credibility, or grace when you take those risks. And we're here to learn how those advantages can be used to create safety for others. So let's talk about 4 types of privilege that we will often see when we're talking about privilege in the context of teams. So we're talking about positional, cultural, economic, and educational. So positional privilege is the influence and protection that comes from your role, title, or status on the team or in the organization. So this includes someone who has been in the company for a really long time, someone who is maybe the lead most role on the team, the most experienced, something like that. An example would be a senior developer who may feel more comfortable or confident openly questioning the feasibility of a proposed feature during sprint planning. Another example could be a cisgendered or white team lead that doesn't second guess interrupting a client, like we said before, to correct them. How about that one? That's hard for a lot of us. Versus a junior team member who would fear receiving backlash for correcting a client so openly. Cultural privilege is the ease of navigating the workplace norm because your identity is considered the default. So that would be something like being white, and we're going to use and/ors here. White, and/or cis, and/or straight, and/or male. And you may have all of those. So then you got heaps and heaps of privilege in the workplace and in life. Those would provide levels of privilege for you. That's cultural. So examples of this would be that anyone holding these different kinds of privilege can normalize using pronouns easier than someone else be able to. Additionally, they may be able to bring up alternative holiday calendars and planning versus someone else. Another example of like the holiday calendars is like someone who's Christian. Our calendars are built in. Our government acknowledges them already. Versus someone who is Jewish or Muslim may have to advocate for the rights that they need that others don't. Economic privilege, having the financial stability that gives you more flexibility and less fear of job loss. I'm working on this one. So this is someone who, let's say they have a savings cushion. So they're a little less worried about losing their job, so they have the ability to push back on a boss that's terrible. Maybe they come from a wealthy family, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it does mean that they're not as afraid of a downturn in the economy because they have more cushion. So my examples are along those lines. An employee can walk away from a toxic client or job without immediate concern for how they're going to pay their bills or feed their family. Another one is that this employee can say yes to opportunities based on passion or mission alignment, while others have to prioritize financial stability over those interests. Our last one is educational privilege. So this is the credibility, access, and confidence that comes from having a traditional or prestigious educational background or credentials. So imagine the difference of someone who has a very prestigious computer science background from Yale. I'm not technical, I don't know where computer science backgrounds come from. Versus someone who went the boot camp route or was self-taught. So my examples are someone with a computer science degree from a top university, maybe assumed more competent from the very beginning of their career. They may also have a more powerful alumni network to tap into for jobs. And then I wanted to say, because of this, they're taught more formal writing, presentation skills, and meeting etiquette. So they feel more qualified to lead meetings and have high-stakes conversations with clients, which, as we all know, is a top skill that we need to have as we climb the corporate ladder. Privileged team members don't have less fear, they have more backup. I said that one. This doesn't mean, again, it doesn't mean that you have less fear. It just means you have a bigger safety net. Maybe you're more trusted because of your title, your background, your identity. And that backup isn't just for you to feel safe. What we're saying in this talk is that it can be a resource that you can tap into. But not just that you can tap into, it can be a resource for you to share. You can extend it to others. Privilege is something that you can use to absorb some of the risk that others are coming into contact with on a daily basis, just by being visible and honest and present at work. So how do we actually do that? How do we turn our privilege into protection and use it to make lasting change in the spaces that we inhabit? 4 tools to be a better team ally. So privilege is has the capacity to absorb more risk. There are so many tools and structures to do this. It's really exhaustive. Our goal here is to start small. So today we're going to focus on 4. Shield, amplify, share, sustain. So we'll define each one in the next few slides. We're going to talk about how to use them well. I will give some real life examples. And then we'll also talk about some nuance in them, some pitfalls we want to avoid when using the tools. And then we'll move on to practicing them. So that was a desire that I have found in a lot of our talks, is this idea of we walk away with the tools, but we want to see them in action. So again, that is our audience participation bit. So that's your second warning that I'll be looking to you all to participate. Okay, let's walk through them. So the first one is shield. So the idea behind shield is that it means stepping in to interrupt harm and absorb or deflect risk away from your marginalized teammate. So you're protecting the psychological safety for that person at risk, and it also signals to the team that that harm is not tolerated, at the very least in this space. And ideally that ripples out to the rest of the culture, but we're starting small. So at least in your presence, this harm is not tolerated. We're going to get to the nuance towards the end. First, you want to talk about when to use this tool. So when someone is being interrupted, constantly dismissed, misgendered, or spoken over in meetings. When you are anticipating high-risk conversations, you can offer to take the lead in that conversation or to just be in the room, be present to be able to offer support or be ready to shield in that conversation. And something else that you may offer, if you are senior to this person, you may also offer to coach them. That will be a part of sharing too, though, so we'll talk about it a bit more. Additionally, when you see harmful feedback or bias in chat, email, or documentation, you can shield by providing intervention that way. How we do this well is we interrupt with care. We can think of, when we think of like shields in war, you think of the line of shields where they don't just stand still, they may move forward, almost bulldozing the enemy. That's not what we're doing. That's not what we're doing. Sometimes that can cause just as much harm to the people that we are trying to protect in that sense. With care is the operative term, and that also takes practice. So we're interrupting with care. An example would be like, hold on, I think that Jill was trying to share her thought, something like that. We want to absorb the risk. We can volunteer to be the deliverer of bad news to leadership. We can be the person that can challenge a problematic decision so that others don't have to carry that fallout. This is particularly important if we are the one in the room that is holding positional privilege. If we're the person that is holding leadership positions, positional privilege, we should be the person that is spotlighting that. We should not be leaving that to our junior people to be calling out things like that. We can name the behavior. If it is safe, call out bias directly. So, hey, let's all make sure to use they, them pronouns for so-and-so. Hey, I do believe this person has changed their name to such. Let's make sure to use that moving forward. We can redirect the spotlight. So we can bring the conversation back to a colleague's contribution or ideas, and that can be as simple as saying, I do believe that this person was talking. I want to make sure that they get to finish their thought. A realistic example is in sprint planning, a junior Black woman engineer suggests an improvement in the code review process. A senior dev dismisses it without discussion. You may choose to step in and say, I think that is worth exploring. And then you offer them space. Janice, could you please walk us through how that would work, how you see that working, and you offer them the stage. The impact this has on the team, for the individual, they experience immediate protection and are able to contribute and are more likely to do so in the future. For the team, it sets a precedent that people learn that this behavior will not be tolerated. And for the culture, it builds the norm that privilege provides protection for shared risk. So the nuance, shielding isn't about rescuing or taking over. It's about redistributing risk. So we want to be careful that we're not making it about ourselves. Amplify. The core idea of Amplify is that we use our voice, credibility, or influence to make sure that someone else's contribution is noticed, credited, or remembered. We want to ensure that the ideas from people with less positional or cultural privilege are given equal weight in decision-making, not lost in the noise or overlooked due to bias. So when to use this tool? We use it when a teammate's ideas are overlooked, ignored, or interrupted, when credit is being misattributed or someone's talking over someone else, and when you can help connect a colleague's point to a key decision that's been made or an outcome. How we do this well? We name or credit people explicitly and generously. We invite them to elaborate in their own words, not ours. Remember, we set the stage for them. We don't take it. We link their idea to project goals and next steps in conversation, and we step back to give them focus. We don't take it. A realistic example is in a design review, a junior developer suggests a more accessible layout. The conversation skips past until later, and you say, I want to make sure to circle back to what Sam said earlier about accessibility. Sam, could you share what you were thinking so we make sure that we give it proper consideration? And then you step back. Let Sam do their thing. The impact that this has on the team is that it builds the norm of giving credit where credit is due. It encourages equitable participation and trust, and it signals that everyone's voice matters, not just the loudest, not just the most senior, including yourself. The nuance, the things you want to avoid. I kind of already said this. True amplification is about setting the stage, not taking it. So the idea in most of these is that you set the stage for the person, you give them space, and you step away. Share. The core idea of share is that you pass along opportunities, resources, and recognition so that they are not hoarded by those who already have this access. The purpose is that you break cycles of gatekeeping by actively widening the circle of who gets visibility, responsibility, and growth. When to use this tool? When you are offered visibility, leadership, or opportunities that you can pass along. When you have insider information or resources that would benefit others. And when someone else's expertise is a better fit for a high impact moment. How to do this well? First, ask if the person wants it. Don't assume. We don't want to put someone on the spot or in a position that they are not ready to take. We want to be able to provide them with context, background, and prep so that they are in the best position to succeed. And we also want to introduce them to the right people to set them up for the visibility that they need to be successful. And then continue to support them after the handoff. Sharing is this portion of sharing is so important. We can hand off a well-meant opportunity to someone, and they can fail miserably if we do not support them in the ways that they need that support. And think about this in a way, you can kind of partner this with something like educational privilege. Imagine that you have educational privilege where you know exactly how to present your ideas because you have the formal training. You know how to present your ideas appropriately to senior leadership or clients because you've been trained to do it. And there's someone who's up and coming that doesn't, and it's through no fault of their own, but you know they can. It doesn't mean that you don't support them or coach them to do it so that they're successful. If there's an opportunity, then you help them be successful at that opportunity. Or your well-placed sharing can really be a detriment to their career. A realistic example, I feel like I gave you one. What did I put here? You're invited to speak at an industry panel on government accessibility, but a teammate has been leading the work. You reply, I'd like to recommend Priya. She's done incredible work in this area. I can connect you so she's fully prepared and supported. It's a good one. The impact on the team. Expands who has influence and leadership experience. It creates a culture of abundance rather than scarcity, and it helps grow the talent and expertise across your team. Things you want to avoid, things that we want to avoid, sharing is intentional and supportive, and it's not dumping unwanted tasks or handing off things without preparation. It's making sure that the other person has the tools and context they need to be successful. All right. This is our last one before we practice at your last warning before audience participation. Sustain. The core idea of sustain is embed allyship into long-term habits, rituals, and systems. This will come up as we head to the end because it's very important to any kind of thing that we want to embed into our system. And system so it remains part of the team culture even when it's uncomfortable and no one is watching. And the purpose is to prevent backsliding into exclusionary norms by making inclusion the default, not the extra. Not the extra. I don't know what's in there. When to use this tool? After an initial inclusion effort gains traction and risks fading, during high pressure moments when the urge is to just get it done, and when the team or leadership changes, can erode our gains in this area. And how we do this well, we want to create repeatable structures, so inclusive meeting norms. We want to build inclusion checkpoints into our workflows and our project plans. We want to regularly check in with our teams on whether these norms are still serving us and whether they need to be revisited and revised. And we want to lead by example when deadlines loom. And the idea there is we lead by example by not letting these things fall to the wayside so that others follow suit. A realistic example, your team adopted a no interruptions rule during stand-ups. 2 months later, deadlines are tight and interruptions start to creep in as they do when tensions are high. So you say, we are short on time, but we are going to stick to our stand-up format. Everyone deserves their space and time to speak. So the impact on the team that this has is that it prevents backsliding. It shows commitment is beyond the surface level, and it builds trust that this is our norm and that it has long-term value. Pitfalls to avoid. Sustaining is about consistency, not perfection. It's showing up again and again, especially when it's hard or inconvenient for us. Practice time. All right, we have about 15 minutes left together, so we have like a good 10 minutes of practice. That was the goal, so we're doing pretty good. So here we are going to, and I can go over shield, amplify, share, sustain as many times as we need to. But what we're going to do is we're going to go over the practice scenario. I have 3, and we are going to look for ways in this scenario that we can use all 3 of our tools. So I'm going to ask you. I have examples too, so don't feel, put on the spot. So practice scenario 1, neurodivergent teammate in sprint planning. Shanice. A neurodivergent developer struggles with long, unstructured sprint planning meetings. Don't we all, Shanice? By the 45-minute mark, they're overwhelmed and having trouble contributing. How could someone shield for Shanice? Do we want to look at the shield slide?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, and I will have to repeat for the little...
Oh, I didn't know it was being recorded.
Yes.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
See, now I got it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I am that person, so I'm not afraid to share that. What I do, what my manager does for me is she makes sure that it's structured. So like these unplanned meetings, if it's not organized and we don't have an agenda to go through where we need to go through, I don't have to attend, and she takes notes for me.
Oh, so there were several wonderful things there.
But she's gone also.
Oh.
So, but that's what she did for me.
So there are several things. There's tight facilitation and a well-planned agenda. That's great.
But also, I'm not going to lie, before I got built into my reasonable accommodation, because, they take forever to make that happen,
Mm-hmm.
She was aware that's, oh God, now I'm yawning. She was aware that's what works best for me, so she did it up front without being told to do it from HR.
I did not pay her to give this comment. So you had someone with positional privilege
White,
that took
woman,
it,
been there for 20
and
years.
cultural, that took it
Management,
on
position.
herself to make that the norm,
Yes.
to give you an accommodation. Excellent. Thank you. That was great. Guys, look what you have to live up to. Excellent. Thank you.
Well, I need to use the restroom. Why don't we take a 5-minute biology?
Excellent. And what's so great about this is you may have to use, he said that a good way to shield would be to say, I need to use the restroom, let's take a bio break. Now, you may have to use the restroom, that may be true. But also, it's a very different way of handling the situation for someone who has just a very different personality, right? You may just notice that people are wilting, and you want to give everybody an out. And the way that you feel most comfortable is saying, hey, I need a bio break. And I think it's just as acceptable, and it does the same work. It still gives that person an out. Yes, thank you.
I think that's a great example also about how it's so frequent that accommodating people ends up being great for everybody. I mean, it's just almost always the case.
Accommodations always serve everyone.
Yeah.
When we serve our least common denominator, everyone is served. Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so how could we amplify? So let's look at our thing again. Shanice is struggling through this 45 minutes, and let's look at our amplify slide. I think this one's a little hard.
It doesn't have to be a person in power to use their voice to support everyone. Because, like, at 45 minutes, she is probably like, ugh. But so is everybody else. So, not saying it would benefit this individual, but going back to what you said earlier, how if we put these things in place, it would benefit everybody, and how we all would be more successful in the end if we, 1, have a structured meeting, but 2, break it up if it's all-day meeting, which I hate. Break it up to 30 minutes, give a 5-minute break, even if it's not a true break, but just like 5 minutes, let's take our mind away from this and something to reset ourselves.
So she's saying that we could also break up the meeting. You're actually touching on all 4 of these. So I'm gonna come back to your response. Jeff.
Would it be good to have what we do is have sprint retros. So like that gives everyone the opportunity to voice their opinion about what went well in this sprint, what could have gone better, and that would give Shanice the opportunity to be like, yeah, these meetings are really long. Is there an opportunity for us to make them shorter?
Yeah.
Maybe more frequent so they can be shorter, like stand-ups maybe. So like having a sprint retro or having a retro after this meeting, sprint planning retro, will give everyone a voice to amplify everyone's voice.
That is a really great idea. And to provide even more safety, I got this from someone who gave a comment in Jill's talk, which was great, where they sent out their retro prior so that anybody who left comments, it was anonymous. And so if Shanice wanted to leave that, but didn't feel safe doing it, you know, when everybody does it real time and you can see the little head floating around, then she could put that and no one would know necessarily that it was her.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
I find this to be hard to gauge. Sometimes people don't want the spotlight on them, but in order to amplify, sometimes you do have to compliment them. So what if saying something like, I really value Shanice's contribution here, and others, maybe name a few other people, and I'm noticing that, you know, we've kind of gotten to a point where folks are kind of losing their steam a little bit. I want to hear from these people, so what can we change about this conversation at this point in order to get everybody back into it?
Love it. I also, sometimes it is kind to give a person a heads up that you're going to do it, depending on their disposition. Not always ask. Sometimes that's kind too. But sometimes if that's something somebody's struggling with, just let them know, hey, by the way, I'm going to give you some kudos. Prepare yourself. Great. Share, sustain. Sustain.
When I was thinking about this too, one thing that we implemented on my team was a sprint planning checklist. So that we follow the same process every sprint.
Tight
sprint
facilitation.
Plan. Yes, like everyone
Agenda.
knows what we have to get accomplished in a meeting. We make sure we hit those things. So
So on my list, I had someone say that we've been going for a while. How about we take a break and regroup? I had for Amplify, someone said that was a great point. Why don't we capture it? So you're hitting on what I was saying. Someone for Share, I had someone volunteer to summarize so that if Shanice had to take a break for herself, she didn't have to miss anything. Something my company does too is I always do transcripts so that you can see it later. And then for Sustain, someone proposed a new team norm. Let's make sprint planning a series of 2 shorter meetings. You're killing it. 2 shorter meetings with breaks and record decisions. So the team benefit here is less fatigue for everyone, not just Shanice, higher quality contributions, and stronger documentation. All right, scenario 2. We're gonna do the same thing. Trans colleague and name mispronunciation. I think I used this example like twice just because I feel like I've seen it several times. Jordan, a trans UX designer, has recently changed their name in a client name, period. In a client meeting, someone repeatedly uses their old name. So how can we shield? Do you want to go back up to shield? How could we shield for Jordan? Yes.
If it's a virtual, I'm always in Zoom or remote, so I send a Zoom DM to whoever's doing it. Sometimes they reply, sometimes they don't,
Yeah.
but I do that at least.
I always look at Slack, but sometimes people don't.
Yeah, it's just, don't want to bring
So for the recording, she's saying that you send a private message. Sure. What if it's a client? So that's not an option. Any ideas?
Why is there an option?
Well, sometimes a client's not on our Slack.
you
But
got
I
a
mean, why
private
is there an
message
option
on Zoom.
to like, why can't you just send them an email or?
Oh, sure. I'm saying they won't see it in the meeting. So what do we do?
Try to model it, I guess, I mean, just keep, maybe find reasons to say their name, I guess.
Yes, and then every time you say the name, you use the correct pronouns for that individual. So like,
Yeah.
thank you, Jordan. That was such a great answer. She is awesome.
I got to tell you, that's mine. And then I just start getting more and more obnoxious about it. I'm real chill at first. Like, thanks, Jordan. And then it gets real, thank you, Jordan. If you feel safe to do it's a practice of safety. Yes.
Again, works better on virtual, I suppose, but it could be that you ask everyone to make sure that their name and pronouns are correct in their visual thing, and maybe that'll get people to look.
Yes.
So that was our standard before to always include the pronouns
Yeah.
and give a description of yourself if you're on camera in a virtual event. How do we do that in today's climate? If somebody is using the wrong pronouns for an individual, we also don't share our pronouns anymore because we're all women and men.
Yeah, sometimes people don't feel safe because they're literally not safe.
Oh,
So I think
We're literally told not to.
That's
Keep
a-
off the pronouns off your.
yeah, we can't put the pronouns at all.
so. There are two things. If you cannot use your pronouns, I think it you can't guess someone's pronouns. So there are a couple things that you as a team can do. You can, as a team, can decide on your language. They, them existed well before people decided to call themselves they, them. I just had this conversation with my older aunt. Y'all know how this goes. She was like, well, where did this come from? And I said, when you used to talk about going out with a friend and you didn't want to say if that friend was a man, you said, well, they took me too. We could all decide that on this meeting, we're just gonna say everybody's they. That could be a decision if we are comfortable. Unfortunately, in the times that we are in, if our cameras are off, if we cannot assume pronouns, sometimes things backslide. Our government hasn't left us many options right now. We as a team can use the correct pronouns. We can correct people, but without a visual, which doesn't always help, without it listed, it doesn't always help. But one thing I do have in Sustain is an opening slide. And the opening slide can introduce each person and their pronouns. And if that person feels comfortable saying they, them, then that's what they put. But if that person feels uncomfortable saying they, them, then I would imagine that they've accepted some of that, not willingly, unfortunately, but they've accepted that change for that meeting as well. What did we cover? Shield. Amplify?
Can we go to the next one since we're
Oh.
second starting?
Thank you. Amplify. I feel like we covered that because my example was that we keep saying Jordan. Share. Share is a good one. How can we share for Jordan?
I'm sorry, I don't remember the share. I didn't show the
Well, I'll give you my example because we ran out of time. You guys did so well. Thank you. Share would just be sending a follow-up email to the perpetrator. Say Jordan's pronouns are, and then ask kindly that they keep that in mind for the next meeting. And sustain would be that we could do an opening slide or so that we are all level setting at the beginning of every meeting in the future. Because we didn't even get to our last one. We have 2 minutes left, so I'm gonna move on. But you guys were excellent. Be the first brick. So how can we be the first brick or help lay the foundation for this practice in the spaces that we share in? So safety is about practice, not perfection. So we need to remind ourselves that this inclusion work never ends. It's not set it and forget it. It is an ongoing practice. So we need to adapt it to better and best serve our teams, the people on it, the projects and social contexts that we are in as they change and evolve. So every new teammate, we change and evolve. Every new client, we change and evolve. Every shift in power dynamic in our orgs, we change and evolve. And sometimes that means starting over. And it means fresh listening. It means fresh learnings. It means new adjustment. We need to think of inclusion as gardening. And every time we stop tending our garden, the weeds creep in. I just started gardening. We create rituals and structures. So we've talked about this. We want to make this practice habitual so that it becomes a part of our systems and it just becomes the work that we do, not work on top of the work that we do. And that includes check-ins, no interruption norms. I struggle with that one. Shared language guides, rotating facilitation so that we are also sharing power. Structures make inclusion less dependent on one person's energy, mood, or power, and they turn our team's values into our team's defaults. And so lastly, we want to stay present and consistent when it's hard and even when it's uncomfortable. So again, we create our rituals and our structures, stay present, and then we want to find motivation that sustains us. And that includes I'm going to skip it because we're out of time. I'm going to say safety is a group effort. It's not a single act, but a practice. It's the rhythm of showing up. So we want to find our rhythm as a team. We want to share the load. We want to stay present, especially when it gets difficult. And that's how we become the first brick in this work, in ourselves, in our teams, in the spaces that we share with others. This is how we use our privilege as a shield as a resource to shield, amplify, sustain. Look, I've lost them.
Share.
Share, sustain. Thank you, Jill. And that's how authenticity becomes contagious. That's how safety becomes contagious for those around us. So, thank you. And a favor. Thank you. Your feedback is super important to me. It's a quick survey. And as a thank you, you will get a cute little PDF of the 4 tools and the description if my QR code works. Because I'm now thinking, did I remember to test it? Yay! It didn't work last year, so. And thank you so much. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm over time, and I don't want to be that person that holds up the next speaker. So I'm going to stop this. Thank you very much.